Also, the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, had praised the words of police, as Cheryl Gay Stolberg notes in her story in the New York Times in an impromptu interview on the streets. He said that they had done a pretty good job. There are questions about that. There are questions about the response, the words. Let's put it all in perspective with Dr. G.M. Cox, director of the Public Administration's Master Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. How do you deal with situations like this and try to take lessons from them to prevent violence at these kinds of events in the future? The Twitter handle is at Tarleton State. Dr. Cox, thanks for being on the program today.
Good morning, Tim. How are you?
I'm well. So to talk about, first of all, I guess we've got, maybe you can see more, but I look at we've got two different things here. One is the words that we're hearing, the things that need to be said in the wake of these events. The other is obviously the physical presence of police. You can take them one at a time or together. Give us your sense of how this needs to work.
Well, I think the physical presence of police, number one, they were there. I'm a little confused why the local police in Charlottesville didn't have a designated area for counter-protesters. We know that's going to happen, and many cities have done that now. So, of course, on the other hand, it's very difficult to corral them once they decide they want to move to a second location. The Supreme Court ruled long ago that the police have a duty to protect all people who are voicing their freedom of speech, even if you don't like that speech. And that's clearly the case here. But at the same time, the counter-protesters have the same rights to freedom of speech, but you put those two things together and you have a problem. So typically you're allowed through certain laws, depending on what the state of Virginia and the city of Charlottesville have, in creating two different venues. So those two conflicts don't go beyond verbs and words and then go into sticks and stones and violence.
There was a move by the city to move the protest to what they considered to be a safer place, but a judge made that impossible. Mm-hmm. But that, I think, had to do with the protesters or the demonstrators themselves, right? The white supremacist group. And you're saying that what should have been done is to separate the two by making another place available to protesters against the white supremacists.
That's correct, and I'm not sure they didn't do that. I can't find anything, but. We've been to school. When I say we, the police have been to school over this issue for, years. You start the 1960s and just go forward. The World Trade, you got the World Trade happened up in Seattle. We've had a lot of these kinds of behaviors, organized behaviors. These people, both counter-protesters and protesters, are very organized. They've learned how to use Twitter. They've learned how to use the internet. And so they actually have communications as good as the police do, and learned how to use it. So we have to be a little bit sharper than that. But some of the things I saw that Charlottesville police did was good. Some of the things that I saw, I would ask questions. But creating a presence, number one, I would start using cameras. I didn't see any police cameras, and they may not have them around. Videography has been shown to, it takes away that anonymity that tends to fuel some of this behavior. In these riot or gang type behaviors, the anonymity, no one knows who I am kind of thing, it kind of lowers that resistance, those inhibitors that keep you from doing really bad things.
Once again, we are speaking with Dr. G.M. Cox, director of the Public Administration Master's Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. Extensive experience, by the way, in law enforcement. I wonder, is this a city or a state function? Charlottesville is not a very large city. It is the home of the University of Virginia. But on the other hand, if you've got that number of protesters and there was, I guess, a state police presence, who should take precedence there, and who makes that decision about who should be responsible for overseeing the security of the people?
That's a great question. That goes down to state and local, something related to what we call federalism. Who's in charge, whether it be the state or the city? I don't know the exact laws of the state of Virginia, but I suspect they're very close to the state of Texas. In the state of Texas, cities are, in fact, subordinate to the state in all things. The state can tell them what to do and what not to do, and they can also defer to the local community, and that looks like what they've done. I've got to tell you that having been a police officer for 40 years and a chief for 34, it's real delicate for the state to come in and start telling a local community how to run its police department, how to respond to certain behaviors. Now, they typically come in as a support group. Now, but that's not to say they don't have the authority to say, okay, we're taking charge. I didn't see anything in that response that would change that.
Well, one of the things about this that makes it different from, say, a flare-up of violence is that there was plenty of time to prepare for this. I mean, this was something on the books for some time, and there were some last-minute attempts to change the venue. But that said, I wonder what kind of coordination typically takes place between a state and a city police department, and whether or not they went through the sufficient kinds of preparation that they needed to go through.
Well, it looked like they may have assessed the overall counter protest group size and determination. That being said, I can assure you that the city of Charlottesville police and the state and the county police, the sheriff, certainly had meetings, discussed this, had a plan, had backup plans, and my guess would be they had a backup force. Now, they'll never admit that, but any police department, any kind of event like this where you don't have a backup force in case it goes to the next stage, well, that would be reckless in my opinion. But so I'm suspecting that, but it's like any plan. One of the famous boxers once said, everybody's got a plan till you get hit in the face. So, and the first thing is on the ground, things are dynamic. They're moving as you saw the people move. I wonder why we didn't have more barricades up on streets, but you've got the barricade only works if people say, okay, there's a barricade. I'll go where I'm supposed to go. And if they're protesters and they say, well, I'm expressing my right, a barricade is nothing but an impediment for me to go around. So you got to back that stuff up with visible police officers.
And when you have that moment when the first punch is thrown, whoever throws it, or the first blow is struck, is that the time to shut it down? In other words, I got the impression that the police, after the violence started, said this is now an unsafe situation and we're going to shut it down. Can you do that?
Yes, I think they did. They may have waited a little bit too long. I understand there were some local, not local militias, but militias like 3 Percenters and other right-wing militias there who stated that I've been able to find that their purpose was to keep the peace. That's interpretable. But here's the point: once it gets to a point where those police officers and the command thinks that it's gone past that threshold of just verbs, words, pushing and shoving, you got to get in there. You got to get in there really quick. You've got to have the proper resources in the proper places with a plan how a mass arrest if you have to. Dispersion, you got to give them animals. And we're part of that group. They must be given an escape route. Give them that escape route. Tell them they're going to disperse. But if you block them off on all four sides, they've got no choice, and people are going to make really bad decisions in that case.
So the event is over. Is this a success, a qualified success in that one person was killed, which is a terrible tragedy, but that is directly tied to an individual driving a car into a crowd? How would you assess the performance by the local law enforcement?
Well, I'd probably give them a B if I were on a 4-point system. I don't know about success. As a law enforcement officer, we have to work these kinds of events and in a way that we have to be kind of basically aloof of the comments because police officers don't like the words that are being said, but they have a duty to protect the people saying it. So we're kind of caught between the middle of this guy's, we don't like what he's saying, but we got to protect him from everybody else. Those people, everybody else, tend to say, well, you're protecting a bad guy. Well, they don't understand that the Constitution of the United States is only as good as the enforcement of it. So when it's their turn to have their speech and we have the same situation, the police are going to be just as much protect for them. I wouldn't say it was a success. Anytime anybody dies and 19 people get hurt. Now, if you take away the car, you have almost a pretty good outcome. You had, that I know of, no major injuries, a couple of arrests. But once that car injects itself into the situation, now you have people dying and 19 people get hurt. It's a real tough situation.
Not something that we want to go through too often in this country, for sure. Dr. Cox, thanks for being on the program today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dr. J.M. Cox, director of the Public Administration's Master Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, an extensive experience in law enforcement himself, giving us a sense of what he thinks went wrong, maybe didn't go wrong in Charlottesville over the weekend. The Twitter handle is @Tarleton State. This is the Morning Briefing on POTUS.